Wasn't there a house here a minute ago?
What house? Why would there be a house in the pocket dimension?
I don't know, you were the one who came out of the closet in the last video.
I think your circuits are fried. There's definitely no house here. Huh. Guess the Foxconn was canon then.
This has got to be the worst intro skit you've ever done.
It could be worse. Could be 8 minutes long.
Get down!
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to not do my normal introduction stick for once because I've got another repeat target. DesolatorMagic. He makes magic content. Last time I covered him, he didn't take it very well. I've kept a bit of an eye on his content because, well, I'm a douchebag. And honestly, his recent new series, MTG Mistakes, it's fine. There's a couple of places within the over 20 videos as of writing the script that I could say something, but it's not like he's objectively wrong. Ellie even more fully explained his net decking problem and explained a lot about what he thought. It wasn't perfect, but it at least elaborated on where he thinks the problem is near the beginning, so hats off. But then there's this video, where he explains why he doesn't like the Kamigawa block. And for those who are unaware, my very first Magic set was Betrayers of Kamigawa, the second set in the block he's saying he doesn't like. Now, before anybody gets on to me for letting my nostalgia get in the way of someone else being allowed to have an opinion, let me just point out that I'm aware of the flaws of the Kamigawa block. I'm not going to go into them now since some of them are very relevant to the video, but the problem here is that most of the reasoning he gives is so bad that I don't even want to describe it in any specific way so as to not spoil how dumb this is. Like, I'm not joking, I'm pretty sure the high percentage of my non-Magic playing audience is going to understand some of these problems before I even start talking. So, may as well not waste any more time and get started.
But this particular video is about why I don't like Kamigawa as a block. Now, there's one thing you should know, and that's that I wasn't playing in 2005 when this came out. I've only heard about, what people thought of it at the time from other players, and it's not like I use Kamigawa cards every single day in Modern, because, well, they kind of suck.
Okay, so I was gonna give you credit for being partially right, but then I did some research and discovered how full of shit you are. Here's a list of cards to get used in Modern strategies that are from the Kamigawa block. Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker, Sakura Tribe Elder, Desperate Ritual, Goryo's Vengeance, Lava Spike, Nourishing Shoal, Through the Breach, Peer Through Depths, and Gifts Ungiven. Keep in mind that I didn't even touch the sideboard, and all of this goes without mentioning the cards that are either banned or stopped being played when the decks they were in got banned out as well. When people complain about Kamigawa's power level, they're definitely not talking about Modern. At least not if they know Modern. And while I'm here, let's talk about the production here, especially compared to the last time I commentated on you. This one picture, that's the only thing you show. Last time, you at least had gameplay footage to keep the viewers visually engaged, and in other videos, I've seen you present visual evidence to back up what you're saying, or at the very least produce some sort of meme or other visual stimulation. Now, I understand that people may watch some of your videos in the background, but considering your viewership in comparison with your subscriber count, visual engagement would probably help keep people's interest without alienating your current fans, especially in the case of footage of a game of Magic being played on X-Mage that you sometimes use. That being said, you're now Patrick Chapin. Enjoy.
What's your name?
Get wrecked, that's my name.
I'm not even saying that people who disagree with me about every last thing I say in this video are incorrect either. This is just my opinion. If you think, no, they did stick to the, the culture pretty well and this and that, and, I disagree with you, that's fine.
Not to be that guy, but you blocked me from leaving comments on your videos, blocked me on Twitter, and threatened to have my last video on you taken down because I disagreed with you. Now, don't get me wrong, if you take a more mature approach to criticism than that now, all good. But let's just say I'll believe it when I see it.
What's your name?
Get wrecked, that's my name.
Let's start out with why everybody else hates Kamigawa. People playing at the time said it was just horrible. I mean, standard Constructive was bad enough, but if you tried to draft one of these sets, you couldn't get a damn thing going.
So, I'm going to pretend to be someone who didn't play during the Kamigawa block for a minute. See if you can identify my point. Excuse me. Hi, Jeff Goldblum. How are you? I was wondering why Kamigawa in Standard was so bad. You said the cards are bad in Modern, which is untrue, and I already debunked that. But anybody who's just taking your word for it and knows the game well enough to understand that Modern and Standard have different power levels is going to be confused as to what the problem is, since Standard is the format with the lower power level. Here, let me hold your freaking hand and guide you through this point about constructive play. The problem with Kamigawa from a constructed standpoint is that the cards did not synergize well with the other two blocks it was in Standard with. It was a huge step down in power compared to Mirrodin, and had very few cards that worked well with the powerful artifact theme Mirrodin had. And although Ravnica was designed with Kamigawa in mind, Kamigawa was designed before Wizards realized that they should include cards that are meant to interact with other cards that will be in its Standard environment. Okay, so now that the guy who likes this block made your point for you, continue talking about draft.
None of the cards work together. I mean, it was just absolutely horrific. And looking at the lists of cards, yeah, none of them work together. It's not like it was today where you're like, oh, I'm going to hopefully go like all flip cards. I'm going to go werewolf heavy. I'm going to go control heavy. I'm going to go flyer heavy. It was like, I'm going to pull some cards and then play with them.
You seem to have confused Kamigawa's problem in Standard with its problem in Draft here. The problem was not that the cards didn't work together. The block had the opposite problem. They worked together to the point where you had to pick your archetype in the first couple of picks, and you had no wiggle room to go anywhere else if you wanted it to be good. It's not the cards not working together, it's the archetypes. And there's a reason I played as much of this point as I did, to show people the context. I legit thought he may have simply been using the word cards, simply because he didn't think saying the draft archetypes had no synergy, but then he brought up drafting werewolves, which is about as narrow as the second most narrow thing in Kamigawa, the spirits. Hell, it was even more narrow than that because at least spirits could switch from two colors to potentially a different third color. Werewolves didn't even have that going for them. Granted, it's easier to splash werewolves into another archetype, but again, your wording indicates that you believe the archetypes as a whole don't work within themselves. Yeah, no, I actually forced green-white Spiritcraft in my first draft because it was the only thing I knew, and my deck functioned just fine. It sucked because, as I said, I forced it, but it still worked.
What's your name?
Get wrecked, that's my name.
So you're traveling through planes and, you got your planeswalkers and they're traveling through planes. I think that actually wasn't really how the storyline worked back then.
Yeah, it was. Look, I know you don't do research, but you even later mentioned Urza, one of the most, if not the most, well-known Planeswalker from before the Planeswalker card type was introduced. Hell, Kamigawa was the first block in a long time to not directly involve a central character from a previous block, and even then, Toshiro Umezawa is the ancestor of Tetsuo Umezawa, a major player during Legends, which takes place on a different plane. And yes, I know Umezawa is not a planeswalker, but instead traveled via portal. It still proves the story involved traveling between planes.
But whatever, the player, you are like visiting different planes and, every single set is on like a different plane. And so, where are we going next? What exciting new thing are they going to come up with? It's going to be so wild. And we land in Japan. Okay, it's Japan. Let's not lie to ourselves. We're in Japan. But see, here's the thing. How the hell did we come across Japan?
First of all, Kamigawa is based on Japan. It is not literally Japan. You're going to go further on that, but that's all I'm going to say on that at the moment. But let's go more into why basing Kamigawa on Japanese mythology makes sense in the context of Magic the Gathering. You see, Dominaria, for the most part, is based on European mythology and culture, outside of the Empire of Madara, which has direct ties to Kamigawa in the story when Kamigawa was introduced anyway. This is similar to the vast majority of the multiverse, save for planes like Tarkir. But Kamigawa was actually really far away from the rest of the multiverse. It was so far away, in fact, that the events of the Kamigawa block were actually in the distant past compared to the events of the blocks around it in the story. Hell, it takes place further back than the entire Weatherlight saga, which had ended 3 years before Kamigawa came out. So the reason that it's in Japan is because at the time, planes were considered to have geographical locations within the multiverse that relate to the geographical locations in the real world. Or at the very least, that's my reasoning. And once again, Kamigawa's far away. Japan's far away from Europe. Makes sense that the cultures that they're based on would change. By the way, small note, this interjection is at 420 in the original video.
Smoke weed.
It's the same thing as like anime series or video games. You land in this one place and you start walking around in like a new city or something. You're like, oh, this place is Chinatown. What the hell is Chinatown doing in the middle of not our galaxy? Now, seeing the series Firefly, it makes sense because apparently Chinese culture was really big before everybody moved off of Earth, and that's why the Chinese language is like really big in certain areas. It makes sense logically, you can follow it, and they explain it. But let's take, a big box office hit like Avatar, Not the Last Airbender, as I like to call it, Smurf Cats the movie. Not only were all of the side characters just the most ridiculous walking, talking stereotypes, but the aliens were basically Native Americans. I mean, they might as well have not even been blue. If they think painting them blue and making them like 12 feet tall is going to stop me from thinking, okay, they basically just ripped off Native American culture and history, they're dreaming.
So you're pretty much right about the aliens in Avatar being Native Americans, and this is a fairly well-known film as well, so I understand why you use this example. And not explaining it is fine because, well, your central point is Kamigawa, so you're just trying to indicate what you're about to say about Kamigawa. Well, bet now you're wondering why I bothered to interject then, huh? Seems like I got nothing to say, right? The story of Avatar is intended to draw parallels between the suffering of Native Americans during America's colonization and expansion. There is a specific purpose behind using a Native American culture in this context that is intended to convey a real-world message in a science fiction setting. Now, if you don't like that, then that's your business, but keep this in mind. This is before I debunk your point about basing something on a real-world culture being bad.
So this is going to sound weird, but I can't get past the fact that it's Japan, but we're not supposed to be in Japan. There is no Japan. There's no Earth.
Arabian Nights. Your argument is invalid.
This is Magic the Gathering. We haven't landed on frickin' Earth yet. You know why? Because I don't think there is an Earth. And they're not just sort of, saying, oh, we got something that kind of resembles a samurai, but they're aliens, or we kind of mixed together Japan and Mongolia, and we came up with like this cool new thing. No, it is straight up Japan. Like, they stole the names and everything. They stole specific religious imagery. They stole specific titles, names, concepts. I mean, you name it.
Wow, okay, I can debunk all this pretty easily. Religious imagery. Wow, I didn't know Japan was a religion. If you mean Buddhism or Taoism, wow, I didn't know Japan invented those. Could have sworn that was China. If you mean Japanese mythology, wow, I didn't know the mythology of a region and the mythology of a religion are the same thing. If you meant any of that, wow, I didn't know the concept of witchcraft as used in Western fantasy is based on the pagan religion.
Oh wait, I did know that.
Titles. Knights actually existed, Names. Okay, so the only thing I can assume is that you're getting onto this setting for using Japanese language in the names of its locations and characters, since none of these names are specific enough to reference an individual or place in Japanese history or folklore, and words like kami and kodama are a type of spirit and not an individual, so it would still be using the language. This indicates that you think real-world language has no place in a fantasy setting. English, motherfucker! You speak it! Concepts. Being vague is fun. Do you get what I'm going at? You get onto one fantasy setting for doing something without acknowledging that another fantasy setting does the same thing solely because of the fact that the fantasy setting you're giving a pass to happens to be from the same culture that you're most familiar with. Now, of course, you could make the argument that you don't think a Western-made product should depict Eastern mythology, but I'll debunk that possible explanation when the proof that it's not the case comes up.
So, hey, that's cool, right? Because they have so much respect for the Japanese culture, and, they wanted to kind of reflect the different, Japanese history and the architecture and all the different beliefs and all that. That's really cool. Except it's not, because that's not what they did. Now, as a positive aspect, they added all kinds of weird stuff that isn't Japanese at all, which is kind of cool. Like, honestly, some of the main mechanics.
Wait, didn't you just say it is Japan? And for that matter, didn't you just say that it'd be cool if they combined multiple cultures to come up with this? The statement indicates that they did that, but that Japanese culture happens to be the predominant culture of the setting, which, you know, the entirety of magic with Western mythology.
They kind of just dropped in like wizard mechanics in the middle of it, like arcane. But then they literally had something called Bushido, so... here's like where the point of contention comes up. There's actual Bushido, and then there's like Japanese anime and Japanese movies mostly made by America and...
Stop! Wait a minute. Fill my cup, put some bullshit in it! Japanese movies, mostly made by America. How fucking dense are you? No, I'm serious. It's not like you provide any examples here, which would really help since this actually is your main point. Also, if this Japanese anime is also mostly made by Americans, then you need to learn the definition of the word anime and Japanese.
Just, you know, really dishonest, inaccurate textbook and like Disney movie Bushido. Real Bushido wasn't even followed by hardly anybody. It was like just a bunch of suggestions. They weren't absolutely written in stone and nobody was like, yes, that is the code I live by.
You're only about half right there. No, it was not written in stone. Hell, it wasn't even called Bushido at all until the Edo period. But to say that samurai did not attempt to live their lives in accordance with the tenets of Bushido as they understood them is asinine at best. That's like saying a Christian who commits a sin isn't living in accordance to Christian values. They still hold the ideals that they've chosen to accept as their moral code, but at the end of the day, they're still imperfect.
It's been kind of blown up to be this ridiculous myth. I mean, right up there with like, you know, the whole history of like Thanksgiving. I mean, you guys know how it goes. Something happened hundreds of years ago and people just report on like the really good, cool aspects of it until it gets warped into something that it doesn't even vaguely resemble.
Here's the difference though. When, say, a historian says that something we thought was true is grossly inaccurate, they actually provide evidence to back up their claims. Hell, the way you're talking, it's like you're just assuming that Bushido not being law meant that no one lived with the philosophy in mind.
I mean, if you look up how samurai really acted, they weren't like noble, awesome, elite warriors and all that. They were just like arrogant, psychotic, murdering psychopaths, and it was legal under some circumstances to just walk up and kill somebody if they didn't like them. Whenever they didn't have somebody to serve, they pretty much just became criminals, or they just, you know, basically said that they're too arrogant and too elite to, you know, get a normal job, so they just became like a contract killer.
Oh, wow. Oh, fucking wow. First, get a hold of some Tokugawa period Bushido literature, such as Hagakure. Before the Tokugawa period, samurai did not need a place in civilian society due to consistent conflict, and you seem to be confusing the word noble in reference to a position of power with the concept of nobility as a character trait. You can be a noble without being noble. The elite warriors and murdering psychopaths thing, first of all, not mutually exclusive, but I'll touch more on that in a minute. Second, the whole legal in certain situations to just kill someone. Yeah, that's called the caste system, and it's not fun being at the bottom of that food chain. That being said, you provide no real evidence to say that killing someone for looking at you the wrong way, which is more insulting in Japanese culture than it is here, by the way, is as common as you make it out to be. Not that you actually say that this was something that was commonly done, you just say that it was legal. Third, I think you're forgetting the fact that samurai were soldiers! Yeah, you know the whole concept of PTSD and people coming back from war in modern society and being unable to adjust to civilian life? These guys had to do that without having any distance between them and the people they killed. So the fact you say it's because they are arrogant that they didn't incorporate into civilian life is an insult to today's military. On top of that, it's not accurate. Tokugawa Ieyasu changed the system of land ownership when he took the shogunate. Land was no longer controlled by the samurai, but was now instead controlled by a daimyo. The displaced samurai had the option to become a retainer for their new daimyo, which is a bodyguard and not a fucking assassin, or be relegated to the peasant caste. So there were those who became retainers in order to keep their place in society. And you want to know what the worst part about your point is? Kamigawa depicts samurai who are the way you described. Battle Mad Ronin, Cursed Ronin, Fumiko the Lowblood, Hand of Cruelty, Izuka the Ruthless, Kuro's Taken, Nezumi Ronin, Numai Outcast, Ronin Houndmaster, Sokenzen Renegade, and Toshiro Umezawa himself was a fucking thief. So this is in no way relevant to Kamigawa.
Samurai were basically just like the worst, most stuck-up rich people you could ever meet in your life. They were pretty much universally hated, and the whole idea of, you know, like samurai and anime and stuff, it's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous.
Rurouni Kenshin takes place during the Tokugawa period, and very few of the samurai that actually worked for the government were respected by the general populace, with Kenshin being considered a rare case in the context of the series of someone who did not want to continue the bloodshed. Where the fuck are your examples?
What's your name?
Get wrecked, that's my name.
I'm sure Japanese people looked at the set, and if they know anything about their own history, they're like, this is utter mythology. It is so stupid and so inaccurate. It's almost insulting. But see, that's where they get away with it. This is way outside just Magic the Gathering. This is like I said, every video game ever where they just throw out a culture and you're like, oh, look, it's Hinduism. Oh, good, we're in space Mongolia. Awesome. Oh, look, I landed on a new alien planet, and, yeah, it's basically Thailand.
Great. So you don't understand storytelling either. That seems to be a theme with people I cover. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to present the overall concept of something that the audience is going to have the easiest time understanding first. In addition, it becomes easier to build a world when you already have a base culture to work off of. And yes, you can certainly deviate more heavily from that once you have the base down, but based on the way you talk, that would be a problem too. What's next? Are you going to compare Star Wars to, let me think of something completely and utterly asinine, 14th century England?
Or of course, you know, my favorite, you go into Star Wars and it's like, oh, we're in frickin' 14th century England. Except in a galaxy far, far away and in space. Because that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Congratulations! You officially now have the intelligence of a bag of bricks. How the fuck do you get 14th century? The only parallel I could even remotely come up with was the prequel trilogy with the War of the Roses, and to be honest, even that's a major fucking stretch. Hell, why not just say that, you know what? No, if I say it, we'll probably just bring it up in the video. By the way, small note, this interjection is at 9/11 in the original video.
But see, that's where they get away with it. It isn't real Japan, it isn't real England, it isn't real Thailand, so now we can just make stuff up, and we can completely just massacre the actual history of the actual place.
Or, you know, come up with their own history for their own place based on the real world history, so that this world feels more realistic and relatable to a viewing audience. Also, traditional fantasy, medieval England, are you fucking—
What's your name?
Get wrecked, that's my name.
So what's my solution? Make up your own damn culture. If you're gonna create a new place, then create a new place. Like, actually come up with one. Like, you look at, you know, Urza's world and that whole Urza storyline. That was amazing. I don't think that was really based on anything. I mean, everything's based on something. But even, like, the Phyrexians and their origin, I mean, you could say, oh, that's based on that sci-fi or whatever. Yeah, probably, but it's not, like, some huge thing that everybody knows about.
The Phyrexians are the Borg, but let's just say you think people don't know Star Trek. Okay, then think for a second. So, the Phyrexians and the Borg both wanted everything to become in their image. So you mean to tell me that this doesn't sound like every imperial society ever? Dominaria is a plane that has seen a large amount of development over time, so of course it's more unique now. But guess what it started out as? Traditional fantasy. And as I've been establishing in this whole commentary, traditional fantasy tropes are based directly on medieval European, mostly English, mythology and history.
What's your name?
Get wrecked, that's my name.
And that's a cop-out. I mean, how hard is it to just come up with your own damn storyline and your own damn culture? Here, let's see. I'm going to give myself 30 seconds to think of a new plane and a description of it. You ready for this? Okay, I checked. That only took me 21 seconds. You ready for this? This is actually pretty good. I'm actually surprised. You meet a settlement of humans because humans are in every realm, and a whole bunch of them, like their religion is that they're obsessed with like OCD level like patterns and stuff. So all their architecture is like real precise, and it's all, you know, geometric, and nothing's chaotic, and everything's just patterns and patterns and patterns. And so all the mechanics on all the cards in that plane would be like, you know, oh, you get this many, or you get exactly 5 of these, you get all 4 of them out of your deck, and you get some huge bonus. Or if all of your creatures have exactly the same attack power, then this, you know, it's kind of like just a play on OCD. And then you've got the opposing forces that are hiding on the moon, and they're trying to come down and just mess things up because they don't like them, and they're just into chaos. They're just into complete chaos. And they don't like order. They think it's, you know, too neat and tidy, and those people are annoying, so they want to just invade and take over, and they use the power of just absolute chaos. Anything can happen, and all of their card mechanics would be based on like random chance, and, you know, flip up the top card and then do this if it's this, or roll a die, and that's how much attack power you have. In fact, you can make a dual deck called Order versus Chaos. For God's sake, I should just sell this to them. See, I did all that without having to reference a major world culture or religion.
Nope. Instead, you created a straw man of religion in general and pitted them against a straw man of atheism in general. Think about it. Religious traditions, at the end of the day, are based on patterns of behavior that people have adopted over time, whether you believe the god they are associated with is real or not. You are taking a more offensive route by making the pattern the god instead of having the god tell them the pattern. And you know what one thing a straw man of an atheist would point out? How the patterns created by the religion are pointless. So no, you didn't base it on something specific, and that actually kind of makes it worse. But then there's your proposed mechanics. While this would work for a dual deck since the mechanics wouldn't be used for limited, I think one thing that you're forgetting is for any set sold in booster packs, they would be designed with draft in mind. The Order faction would be undraftable because of the same issue Kamigawa has. The archetypes require very specific cards in order to work, so there's really no way to control in a draft environment getting these cards. The Chaos faction, due to its mechanics being entirely about random chance, would either be almost entirely relegated to red, if not entirely relegated to red due to Magic design philosophy involving color pie. Therefore, your only easily draftable color would wind up being red. Never mind the fact that the Constructive decks would basically build themselves and not allow for any flexibility. In other words, never design games. Look, he's basically done, and I'm gonna cut it here too. Desolator, you have every right to not like something that I do like, as I've said. I fully acknowledge that the set is very, very flawed. However, the reason this commentary is being made is because the information behind your opinion is misinformation. You got your information from secondhand sources and in no way bothered to look up the cards or the flavor of the set in order to understand how true it was. This is in no way a personal attack on you. This is me laying out actual facts and providing a dissenting opinion. So, I'm going to end this video with some advice. Before you make a video, actually know what you're talking about. You tend to make pretty good videos when you do that. Welp! This video went everywhere and back. How the hell am I gonna end it?
I don't know.